There's been recent polls done by the Trump campaign, including ourselves, where not only are we doing well in the battleground states, but the battleground is expanding. He's on offense when it comes to the demographics of who's going to decide the election. They basically had him tied among Hispanic voters, and they also had him tied among young people. And that's a big, big problem for Joe Biden and the Democrats.
It's difficult to see why Democrats think they're in a good position. If there's anything but a conviction, if it's a hung jury, a mistrial, an acquittal, it's going to be politically disastrous to the Democrats. I don't think anybody could think anything else. And a conviction is not a sure thing. So they're risking a lot here on a case that, as you and I agree, is probably not going to impact things much if he is convicted.
Welcome back to the Sean Spicer Show. So much going on in the world of politics. Two amazing conversations today. One, Jim McLaughlin, the president's pollster, who actually happens to be from New Jersey. And I think he's going to tell us whether or not New Jersey's in play, but what other states. And then the best political mind I know in the world of journalism, Mark Halperin, is going to tell us what's on the minds of the two campaigns, what's keeping them up at night. You're not going to want to miss this. Before I get to the political stuff, because it's great. Trump's in court, obviously, today. Michael Cohen, the biggest goofball I've ever... at some point, I'll tell you stories about Michael Cohen, but this guy is just unbelievable. And I think the defense is going to have a field day with him, because that guy will say or do anything. And he's portrayed himself as like this big bully. And hopefully that gets shown to the jurors today. And then it's amazing. Everybody's now, this is the cool place to be. Speaker Mike Johnson announced he was going up to court today. Like, it's the cool thing. Anyway, and then I want to tell you one quick update. Yesterday, I mentioned how Jen Psaki had made up this story. She got called out for disinformation in her book. Well, guess what? She said that the detail in a few lines of the book about the exact number of times he looked at his watch will now be removed. That's called lying. It's so funny how they're all treating her with kid gloves. But the fact of the matter is, here we go again. It's amazing. She tried to do cleanup in aisle one. Read your book, Jen. Is what did Mock say yesterday? She pulled a gnome. Jim McLaughlin is here, the president's pollster. He's going to break down where everything stands for us like no one else. So stay tuned in that. Later this week, Tomi Lahren's here. We're going to bring you inside the courtroom tomorrow with people that are there. I'm not going to tell you who yet, but guess what? Tomorrow, people who are in that courtroom are going to be with us tomorrow. So make sure you hit the notification button and subscribe so you don't miss that. Friday, Tomi Lahren will be here. But before we get to Jim McLaughlin and then Mark Halperin, I want to tell you about the amazing Mother's Day gift that I gave my mom. I told you I was going to do this. I had this painting, this picture made into a painting by the folks at Paint Your Life. And I chose to do it in this beautiful watercolor, but you could choose whatever you want. Charcoal, acrylic, they can do anything that you want. If you text Spicer to 87204, Spicer to 87204, the folks from Paint Your Life can take a photo, multiple photos for that matter. They can make it a compilation and make you the most meaningful, unique gift that you'll give anyone. I gave it to my mom. She doesn't want me to show. I literally took a video just so I could show everyone, and my brothers and sisters, by the way, which I already have. And now there's a debate about where she's going to hang it. I win. I won Mother's Day. Now, can you win Father's Day? Can you win a birthday? That's up to you. But I'm giving you the perfect gift for the person in your life. And again, it's cool because you can take multiple pictures and make them into one. If you text Spicer to 87204, you get to meet the artist. They send you videos. It's guaranteed. And if you text Spicer to 87204, the folks at Paint Your Life are going to give you 20% off and free shipping. I just did all the work for you for the perfect gift. There you go. You're welcome. Check it out. Go to Paint Your Life. You'll get to pick out the perfect painting, frame, the artist. You get updates. It's 100% guaranteed, 20% off and free shipping. Text Spicer to 87204. Now, I want to bring you in the guy, the man, Jim McLaughlin, the president's pollster. Let's bring in the man with the numbers. Jim McLaughlin, good to see you again.
Great to be here, Sean, as always.
You know, I was watching Trump's rally in Wildwood, New Jersey, and I kept thinking of you because it was like, he's like, we're putting New Jersey in play. And I'm like, the one guy who's definitely excited. And I can tell if you're not watching the video of this, you got to see Jim McLaughlin smile, because I was thinking he's sitting there going, finally, someone's thinking about New Jersey. And here's my thing. I hope New Jersey's in play, but I feel like I whined about this yesterday, and I'll get off my soapbox today. Just get me to 270, and then you can go for whatever you want. But I felt like just lock in Pennsylvania, lock in Michigan or Wisconsin, and then I don't care where you spend your time. Put Minnesota and Virginia and New Jersey in play. But I felt like a little early to be talking about New Jersey. What do you tell me?
And look, though, this is what President Trump wants to do is not just bring his message to the battleground states, but to also bring it to Americans all across the country that are feeling neglected, because he's their voice. And look, there's been recent polls done by the Trump campaign, including ourselves, where not only are we doing well in the battleground states, but the battleground is expanding. Basically, we did a poll. Tony Fabrizio did a poll in Virginia that basically had the race a statistical tie in Virginia.
Right.
In Minnesota, there's been media polls that have Donald Trump ahead. And look, you've even got some Democrats out there, people like James Carville, saying, look, he's got to run an inside straight and win what they used to call the old Democrat blue wall, which, as you know, is Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And all the recent polls have Donald Trump ahead there. You know, the one state in the New York Times poll where they had it basically a statistical tie, which was Michigan. Right after that, a poll came out from an independent source that had Donald Trump up by 6 points. So, look, I think it was really important for the president to do what he did. You know, I was talking to law enforcement folks on the ground that I know down there in the Wildwood area. They were telling me,
how do you know them, Jim? A little personal experience?
A lot of good friends. You know, the 80s were tough, Sean, as you well know.
I get it.
But what we were talking about, they were saying that we expected 40, maybe 50,000 people. And they were saying when the Trump campaign was telling them 40,000 people, they thought it was an exaggeration. They were telling me afterwards, they thought there were over 100,000 people there. And as you know, people come from all over the country to show up at these rallies. So it's not just about New Jersey. And I'm betting maybe close to half those people that were there were from Pennsylvania. And we obviously all know that Pennsylvania is going to be a key battleground.
I hope so. I hope they got all the data and can at least go after them afterwards. And that was what I was arguing yesterday is it's not just about attending the rally, because I don't care. I mean, to your point, when Donald Trump shows up, he could be in South Dakota. It's going to get national attention. It gets covered on Right Side Broadcasting and streamed on Twitter. I mean, like, people hear about it. They see about it. The mainstream media even has to cover it. So it's less about where you are. But the one aspect that I've tried to get people to understand is they get the data of the people coming in, then they can follow up with them, make sure they're committed to vote. So there's a very important get out the vote logistics aspect to these rallies that Trump really brings that no one else can. If you let's assume the battleground states, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Michigan, Arizona, Wisconsin, Nevada, North Carolina, the states that you mentioned afterwards, Virginia, Minnesota, etc., rank for me 1, 2, 3. If you just said to me, the number one state that I think could fall after the 7 battleground states is, and then just go 3 or 4 deep.
I think it's Minnesota.
Yep.
And I think what's happened in a place like Minnesota, because a lot of folks are poo-pooing it, but it's been the Democratic failures there. The Democrats control everything there, and it's a little bit similar to Michigan in that sense. And they were the folks that during the Summer of Love, I mean, basically what used to be one of America's great cities, you know, the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, has been destroyed. Just like our big cities like New York and San Francisco, Chicago, Baltimore, etc., have seen big problems. You're seeing the same thing in a place like Minneapolis-St. Paul. So I think problems with the economy, people not feeling safe on an issue like crime, and the Democrat failures in that state. I think a couple of the other states are obviously Virginia, I think, where things are going to be close. I also think New Hampshire, because the folks in New Hampshire, just like in Minnesota, even though the media and the White House is trying to tell us things like energy costs, you grew up in New England, they just went through a hard winter. In spite of these people telling us all about global warming, their utility rates went through the roof under Joe Biden because of his crazy Green New Deal energy policies. So I think a place like New Hampshire, where voters have been really getting crushed in terms of affordability, I think that's also probably going to be in play when everything's all said and done.
There's a bunch of New York Times polling that came out over the weekend. It's got Trump up 13 in Nevada, 9 in Georgia, 6 in Arizona, 3 in Pennsylvania, and 1 in Wisconsin. Biden, the only state he was leading in that particular poll was Michigan. Do you think that's an accurate representation of the best opportunity for Trump and the worst?
Yep. You know what the interesting part is, too, about that is you see how well he's running in a place like Arizona and a place like Georgia. The reason why he's doing well in Arizona and Nevada is because of how well he's doing among Hispanic voters. I mean, basically, Donald Trump is, for all intents and purposes, he's tied among Hispanic voters. And then you look at a place like Georgia, and I worked for Nathan Deal when he was the governor there, and he was elected overwhelmingly. Why? Because he was getting 20% plus of the black vote. And now we see Donald Trump doing the same thing. So not only is Donald Trump on offense when it comes to the battleground states, he's on offense when it comes to the demographics of who's going to decide the election. And I think probably the worst numbers for the Democrats, for Joe Biden in those New York Times polls was the fact they basically had him tied among Hispanic voters, and they also had him tied among young people. And that's a big, big problem for Joe Biden and the Democrats.
But you agree that's if you had to stack the battleground states, you think Nevada's the first one to fall?
I think Nevada is going to come in for President Trump. I also think Georgia is the other one.
Yeah, well, that's one too. I mean, that's one too.
And he's been significantly overperforming again in Arizona. And in Arizona, what's the big issue? It's the border and immigration, and Joe Biden's failures there. And that's why Donald Trump tends to be overperforming there.
All right, I hope you're enjoying this conversation with Jim McLaughlin, but I want to tell you about another great guy that I know named Leo Grillo. Let me tell you about the work that Leo Grillo is doing. If you are an animal lover, if you've rescued animals, I have, you know that. I've rescued 3 dogs. Then you're going to want to know about the work that Leo Grillo is doing at Delta Rescue. If you go to deltarescue.org, you can see the amazing work that they're doing. A no-kill sanctuary, not shelter, as Leo likes to tell me. It's not a shelter. It's a sanctuary. Dogs, cats, horses, all sorts of animals get to roam free, get the care that they need, the veterinary support, the nutrition support. All of that is taken care of for life. And it's only done because of the generosity of people like me and you. $5, $50, $100, $1,000, whatever you can do. That's how Leo Grillo funds this mission that he's created. But more importantly, if we want this to be an enduring thing, something that can keep going on and on and on. And like I said, go to deltarescue.org, watch the videos, take a look at the amazing work they do. Go to the estate planning kit and just think about it, download it, see how easy it is to make Delta Rescue part of your estate planning. And that way, Delta Rescue and the amazing work that Leo Grillo has done can endure for decades, hopefully for centuries. Please go to deltarescue.org and consider a gift right now and to make sure that this continues forever. deltarescue.org. Check it out. Thank you. So I'm going to bring up your state of New Jersey and go back to Nevada if I can. Whenever we are doing well in New Jersey, like there's a Senate race or a gubernatorial race and people say we're within the margin of error, within 5, I always feel like it's like the Charlie Brown, Lucy with the football, that we always get excited, it gets pulled away and we end up losing by, 6, 7 points. I feel like Nevada is very similar. And it's funny because right now the polling shows Trump up 10, well outside the margin of error by any means. But there's a story in the New York Times today. Nevada, newly Trump-friendly, poses a challenge and a mystery for Biden. And this is what it says. President Biden appears especially weak in Nevada, where Hispanic voters have soured on him and economic pessimism abounds. But Democrats note that the state has rallied for them in the past. And that, I will admit, is my concern as well, that it's like we get all excited and then Lucy pulls the football out. Yeah. Why is this time different?
It's a great point. is, first of all, we're not taking it for granted. Second of all, what's happened there is, yes, those Hispanic voters are coming on board for Donald Trump. And the state of Nevada has probably been hurt as much as any state when it comes to the affordability, the cost of living, and inflation. They're already paying about $5 a gallon for gas out there. So that affects everybody. It especially affects the middle class and the working poor. And the reason is, we're seeing how this demographic shift is changing right now. And we saw it with the folks that showed up, the 100,000 strong that showed up for the rally down in New Jersey. It's middle class, it's working class Americans that used to be the bedrock of the Democratic Party are now coming over to Donald Trump. And what they're seeing is a direct comparison. These people remember what it was like when Donald Trump was president, when it came to issues like the economy, and it came to issues like inflation, crime, and immigration, versus where it is right now with Joe Biden. And it's really about Donald Trump's success on these issues versus Joe Biden's failures when it comes to these issues.
The one issue that concerns me the most from a Republican/Trump standpoint is abortion. The Dems have nothing else. Immigration, they're not going to fix it. China, the policies are not going to get better, despite this attempt today to institute new tariffs, which is, i.e., the Trump policies that they rallied against. The economy and inflation can only get so much better by the time people make up their mind. Abortion is all they have, and they're going to go all in on it. How concerned is the issue of abortion to you when it comes to potential swing gettable voters or soft Republicans?
I think what's going to happen again, the voters are going to look at the contrast when it comes to Donald Trump on the issue of abortion versus where Joe Biden is. And look, the person that's taken the centrist position on that issue is Donald Trump, not Joe Biden. Joe Biden was just recently attacked by the Catholic bishops. Why? Because at a pro-abortion event, which is anathema to, the Catholic Church, he's crossing himself when talking about
that was disgusting.
That was unbelievable. And I give the bishops credit for standing up to him on that. But think about the position that Donald Trump has staked out on this. He's about 10th Amendment rights. It's about federalist rights. It's about letting the people decide. The person who's talking about democracy on the issue of abortion is Donald Trump. What he's saying, and rightfully so, is he's basically saying, you know what? Alabama shouldn't have the same abortion laws as California. Let's put it in the hands of the people. If the people don't like the abortion laws in California, they're going to change their politicians. If they don't like the abortion laws in a place like Alabama, they're going to change the politicians. So I think that Donald Trump has staked out a much more centrist approach when it comes to the issue of abortion. And I also think if that's all Joe Biden and the Democrats talk about from now until Election Day, and by the way, that's pretty much all they talk about when they're on the ground campaigning, what little campaigning Joe Biden does. And look, he's going backwards in the polls. He's not moving forward.
So let me play devil's advocate for a second. Since Roe v. Wade was sent back to the states, Republicans have not done well on ballot initiatives from Ohio to Alabama. Candidates who are, when it's been an issue, it hasn't worked out. Why is this going to be different?
Oh, I think because it's not about a ballot initiative. And look, they're putting ballot initiatives up, or they tried to. It got thrown off the ballot in a place like New York. And basically, in New York, they allow abortion up to the moment of birth. So whereas these ballot initiatives may do well, they trust their local, whether it's member of Congress, the governor, or the Senate, because look, even though some of the abortion laws are getting a little bit more limited in some of these states, nobody is banning abortion out there. And I thought was really interesting was when Donald Trump came out with his position to let the states decide, USA Today put out a headline that said Trump comes out against national abortion ban. what did the White House do? They put pressure on them to change that. And it wasn't because it was not accurate. It was accurate. It's because, unfortunately, the Democrats are trying to demagogue and scare people on the issue of abortion. But I think, again, the people are a lot smarter on this, and they're seeing, especially in these battleground states, nobody's talking about banning abortion.
Right. Okay. I think that's interesting, because before it was an issue, now it's a campaign and it's a person that you're voting for, and you get to look at their specific. That is a difference. I'll give you that. We'll see. I think a lot of it.
It's a good example. I don't mean to interrupt, Sean, but look how well the Republicans did in 22 in the congressional races in New York, a very pro-choice, pro-abortion state. And yet a bunch of Republicans won, especially in the congressional races. Why? Because the voters were comfortable with them on the issue of abortion, and then the Republicans won on issues like the economy, immigration, and crime.
I think the key to your analysis is that if Donald Trump takes his head on and explains his position and sells it, he'll win. Because I agree with you. I think he's got the best position on this. So I got two more things I want to get to with you. When I read those polls from the New York Times, Nevada, Trump up 13, Georgia, Trump, you start to peel beneath, and I want you to explain this to viewers, because the caveat was that's among all voters. Then they said among likely voters, it gets a lot closer. When people are looking at public polls, there's always a difference in my mind between adults, registered voters, likely voters, et cetera. Explain to viewers what they should look for when they're looking at a poll in the New York Times or CNN or whatever.
Yeah. And that was the interesting part about that is, and look, when we do our polls, whether it's our national poll or we're polling for clients, we always do likely voters. And we also go to the expense of building out extensive voter lists. So we know we're actually talking to voters when it's all said and done. And look, I'm looking at a place like Arizona, and here's President Trump. It's got a pretty substantial lead in a place like Arizona. And it looks like Republicans tend to outnumber Democrats in Arizona elections, especially during presidential years, by about 6 points. Their sample only had Republicans outnumbering Democrats by about 2 points. So some of these surveys, they actually undersampled Republicans, and yet Donald Trump and the Republicans were still doing really well, not just for the president in his race, but also in the Senate races. So what I tell people is, look, you want to look at the polls that are done of likely voters, and also take a look at the party. Because you see a lot of these national polls, the folks that were guilty of it in the last one, I think it was Marist, where they basically had Democrats outnumbering Republicans by about 6 points, and they had Joe Biden ahead by like 2 points. Well, they undersampled Republicans by about 6 points in their survey. So you want to make sure party makes sense. The parties are pretty much about even in our national elections now, and you want to make sure they're looking at likely voters.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. All adults doesn't matter. All adults don't vote. Registered voters don't vote. Likely voters are getting closer to an accurate sample. But it's, again, as you point out, the key word in your phrase was expense. It costs more money to do that. The media organizations don't want to spend the money because they don't need as much of an accurate reading. And that's why I think a lot of times when people complain about the polls, it's because they're not the expensive ones. They're the cheap. They're the Chinese version. Anyway.
They're using it to drive a story. They're using it to get clicks and drive a story when it's all said and done.
All right, Jim McLaughlin, always a pleasure to be with you. Look forward to checking back in soon.
The pleasure was all mine, and I miss you out on the campaign trail, Sean.
Well, we'll see. We get to get together like this. Anyway, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right. That was a great conversation with Jim. I want to bring in Mark Halperin for some amazing insight as to what we can expect going forward. Mark Halperin, welcome back. Let me ask you a question. You talk to people all the time in these focus groups that you do. There's a narrative in the media about the effects that these cases will potentially have on Donald Trump's support. And I'm starting to wonder, clearly during the primary, it helped him. When you talk to folks and they give you feedback, like I know you did a big two-way with a bunch of undecided voters, are the court cases at all playing into how they ultimately will vote?
Well, first of all, it's court case single, right? I don't think any of
Good
the
point.
others are going to be germane in terms of the trial. Most of the discussions I've had, people say it's political. They might think Donald Trump did something wrong. They might think he should have been indicted. But to do it in an election year, a lot of people think it's political. Net, if there's no conviction, I think Trump will turn this into a big positive for him with a lot of voters. If there is a conviction, I think it's up in the air. It could hurt him with some, help him with others. I think it's pretty clear from people's attitudes about this, and even from some of the legal analysts who don't like Donald Trump from their attitude. My guess is that if there's a conviction, it will largely be discounted. But we'll have to see, because it will depend on what the jurors say. It will depend on how it's covered. But I think there's one outcome that could hurt him. Others will help him. And in general, I don't think the environment for this one case has been good for the Democrats.
Yeah, I think so much of this is baked in. I keep telling people it's not like you're learning something new about Trump, and that the people who say that this makes a difference weren't going to vote for him anyway. And that's my 2 cents.
I think there's one category of voter that I think could be different. And,
Okay.
and it might be as true to life as a category as a rainbow unicorn. Are there voters, and some of them show up in these hypothetical polls about future activities, which are there voters who say, I just can't vote for a felon to be president. Forget inflation, forget every other issue. I just can't vote for a convicted felon. I doubt that's a dispositive group, but I can't rule out that it exists in enough numbers to make the difference in a close race.
I think how it's portrayed matters ultimately. I hate to interrupt this conversation with Mark Halperin, but just as you didn't expect this commercial to come right in right now, you're not going to expect when you lose power. It's not going to happen at a time that's convenient. You will not be prepared. That's why I have the Patriot Power Generator 2000X in my house. Now, I used to have a gas-powered generator. And the last time that this happened, we were out of power for, I think it was 5 or 6 days. And I would trek down to the gas station. There's 2 of them. One was closed, one was open. And I had to fill up this gas tank, trek it back to my house, fill up the thing every few hours, string the cords in, and make sure that I timed out when it would stop, because I had a refrigerator running on it and a lot of other things. The Patriot Power Generator 2000X goes anywhere that you want in your house. It's powered on solar panels that come free. And if you go to 4patriots.com/Spicer, you can get one too. You will not know when the time is coming. Maybe the power goes out because of a natural disaster, wind, and hail, storm, who knows what, an earthquake, or a power grid attack. You won't know, and you won't know for how long. But with the Patriot Power Generator 2000X, you will be ready. You can bring it in your house. You can power your refrigerator, your devices. You think about it, if you've got kids or family members that have a computer or a phone, you will be prepared. It's completely portable. I can lift it. That means you can too. So go to 4patriots.com/Spicer so that you will be ready in a time of emergency. Get that Patriot Power Generator and you won't be sorry. Now back to the conversation. I want to ask you about this, and I will admit my bias. I look, like, sometimes I look for these things, but you have worked at a lot of major media organizations. So tell me, in all honesty and candor, if I'm being whiny or if this is a fair criticism. When I watch the media, they keep referring to it as Donald Trump's hush money case. And it's funny because in their legal panels, they'll admit it's actually a bookkeeping charge that he's faced with. And that's
right.
Okay. Am I being whiny when I say, like, they look like they want every adjective that they use in terms of how they describe the case, Donald Trump, associates around him, is always with a pejorative, right? So it's a hush money case. He's surrounded by sycophants. And I saw this the other day, and I again, maybe this is, again, just me being picky, but there was this big thing about Biden and his values, and it said Biden, a devout Catholic. And again, I've always made clear, I don't like getting into people's religion. But as a Catholic, Biden is very against several of the major teachings of the church. Therefore, he may be he may attend church, he may love the Catholic Church, but he is not devout. And that's undisputable. He's for a lot of the things that are anathema to church teaching. And again, I'm not trying to go down a rabbit hole here, but it just seems to me when they describe Biden, it's always with a very positive description. When they describe Trump, his trials, his tribulations, his associates, it's negative.
Well, you've got 4 things coming together in the coverage of the trial that are mammoth regarding the press. and I think they yield largely biased coverage. Number one is traditional liberal media bias. Most of the press supports the Democrats over Republicans. Two is Trump derangement syndrome. Three is the press sees as its role to stop Donald Trump from winning. And the last one is not peculiar to Donald Trump, and it's not political. But I've been a student of coverage of criminal trials my entire career. The press covers criminal trials up until the verdict as pro-prosecution. They just do. That's just the way it is. And you add that into the mix. Now, if Trump's acquitted, all of a sudden they'll say the prosecution was doomed from the beginning and the defense was genius. That's the way it always happens. But up until you reach a verdict, and unless the verdict is not a guilty verdict, the press just for some reason slavishly accepts everything the prosecution puts on and sees the defense as scrambling and weak. I don't know why that is, but it's always been the case. You add it to the other three factors, and it's incredible. Every so often, one of the legal analysts on one of the liberal networks will speak the truth about some of the aspects of this case, and they're quickly shushed and moved aside. For the most part, the coverage is comically biased.
It is interesting because I look at, and I tell people, I flip around. I love doing that. I can't help it. You had Michael Smerconish from CNN, Fareed Zakaria from CNN, even Ellie Honig, their famed legal analyst. I'll talk about the merits of the case. And when you talk about the merits of the case, not the personality of it, it's true. It's a very flawed case and a very difficult prosecution. If it wasn't in Manhattan, I don't think we'd be having the same coverage, because I think they just assume that the outcome and the verdict is presumed because of the makeup of the Manhattan jury.
It's just such an obviously political case, not just in terms of the timing, but in terms of the structure of the case. We'll see what kind of evidence gets put on in the balance of the prosecution case. I will say that, of course, if you go back and look before this became the only case likely to go to trial, you had lots of smart liberal legal commentators saying this case is a joke. It's not just weak substantively. It's suicidal potentially politically. If you're looking, as some Democrats are, for Joe Biden to switch course and do something different and not just assume he can win on the same old, he could come out and say, I don't normally comment on cases. This isn't a federal case, but I still wouldn't normally comment on it. But let me just say, I don't want to win the election on this legal case. The jury can decide what it wants to do, but I've looked at this case, and this isn't the kind of case that should determine who's elected president. That would be honest. It's probably what a lot of people around Joe Biden think. I know it is. It may be what Joe Biden thinks. And it's difficult to see why Democrats think they're in a good position. If there's anything but a conviction, if it's a hung jury, a mistrial, an acquittal, it's going to be politically disastrous for the Democrats. I don't think anybody could think anything else. And a conviction is not a sure thing. So they're risking a lot here on a case that, as you and I agree, is probably not going to impact things much if he is convicted.
The more I see this unfold, I actually, from the jump, I was like, he's going to get convicted, right? It's Manhattan. The jury's just going to be unbelievably biased. But as I've seen this unfold, and I'm no lawyer, but I was like, again, when it comes back to the merits of the case, this is a bookkeeping offense. And you have to prove that Trump intended to do that, to violate it in furtherance of some not yet charged other crime. Yeah. I don't know that and again, I still think the odds are with them, but it just takes that one individual. And I agree with you.
The two lawyers on this jury should be disbarred if they vote to convict.
Oh, that's interesting. That's a good point. I mean, because they literally have some. I know, but it's just they look at it.
I'm kind of kidding.
I'm not. I actually think that's a brilliant point.
No serious lawyer looking at this case could say that beyond a reasonable doubt they're going to prove the defendant's guilt. They just couldn't.
Well,
that's leaving aside the layer of it shouldn't have been brought.
Yes, and I think with all the other facts, it was a misdemeanor, a bookkeeping offense. There's no additional follow-on charge that's been made yet in terms of campaign finance. I think for all those reasons, and secondly, it will depend on how they handle Michael Cohen today. But I heard a really brilliant analysis, which is if they embrace Michael Cohen and say, you wanted to be White House chief of staff, you were a pleaser, you wanted Mr. Trump's affection, and so you tended to do things on your own that you thought would please him. Didn't you do this on your own? He's already a convicted liar. As long as they can, a morsel of that doubt, I think they have a shot. I do want to pivot to a question that I think you are uniquely suited to answer. You talk to everybody. I've said this publicly and privately, but I think you're the best sourced journalist I've ever met. People like talking to you. You should charge them for therapy sessions, I think. So let me ask you this. What keeps both campaigns up at night? What is that thing or things? So, for example, is it on the Trump side, the lack of money? Is it the Biden campaign's erosion with minority groups? What is it mechanically or message-wise or issue-wise that both campaigns are going, this is our biggest concern right now?
Right. I'll pick one for each side. Thank you for your overly generous comment about me. On the Trump side, I think it's women voters. I think it's a combination of abortion, Trump fatigue, some other ways in which there's just going to be a gender gap, and it could be pronounced enough, particularly if Bobby Kennedy in the right states for Biden pulls some votes from Trump for men. I think women would be number one on the Trump list. The mechanics, I said I'd only do one for each, but now I'm going to do two. The mechanics, right? Being badly outspent and having to build with less resources an early vote program when your candidate's got a history of saying early votes for the devil. I think that'd be number two. On the Biden side, it's the failure to be able to have a positive economic message. I think while they're still trying, inflation is just too big a thing, and not having a positive economic message, not having a vision for a second term is just death for an incumbent. And then second, it's the erosion with all these groups, young voters, Black voters, Hispanic voters. The erosion is so across the board. They're going to try to target these individual groups. They're going to try to have a macro message, but it has been persistent and consistent that his being behind in the battleground states is driven by not just the weakness with one group, but with many, and trying to make up ground with many groups definitely is keeping them up now.
So on the economic message for Biden, the issue that I think he faces is one of denial. I watched that interview that he did with CNN's Aaron Burnett, and I think politicians with the economy that he has two choices. One, try to tell people that it's not what they think it is, which is what he's trying to do. And the second is embrace it and say, I get it. People continue to struggle. These are why I'm doing what I'm doing. This is the plan to increase things. Basically feel their pain. And I feel like he's chosen the latter, not the former, and tried to tell people what you feel in your gut, what you see every day is not real. And that's just a losing strategy.
Yeah, I'll disagree with you respectfully, because I read all the Biden statements, the White House statements about the economy. From the beginning, they've done both. Feel the pain, but say, but things are getting better. My plans are going to help. If he were ahead 5 points in the polls, people would say he's balancing it perfectly. He's a genius for talking about both, hope and understanding. But when you're behind, the prism is totally negative and people think he's not balancing it well. It's impossible to balance well. First of all, because despite their spin, inflation remains a huge problem for people in their daily lives. And there's no way to spin that, zero ways to spin that. But the other thing is, again, at some point, I think some people around him are starting to realize this isn't going to be about the celebration of Joe Biden. The last three incumbents who won re-election, Clinton, Bush, and Obama, only did it by destroying their opponent, by making their opponent unacceptable to a large enough group of voters. And that's what they're going to do. They're not going to succeed in selling Joe Biden economic genius. They're going to only succeed, if they do succeed, in saying you can't put Donald Trump back in the White House. And I think you're going to see the message turn to that pretty decisively.
How much? I have a theory, which is that I posited yesterday on the show, right? A lot of folks that I talk to, and the pollsters call them double haters, people that don't like Biden, don't like Trump. And I get this is a small subset. So I'm not trying to claim this is big, but then again, in elections where you're winning by 10,000 votes, a small subset can matter. I believe that a lot of people I talk to will say, I don't like Biden and I'm scared about Kamala Harris. And I ultimately believe she'll be the president. So I don't like that. And I don't like Trump. I believe that Trump has an opportunity to put somebody on the ticket as VP that it gives them an excuse to say, I'm not voting for Donald Trump. I'm voting for fill in the blank. Do you agree that there's enough people that think that way, or is that just pie in the sky?
Well, as you said, on the margins, everything can matter and be decisive. So I think Donald Trump defies the rules of conventional politics in nearly every way. One way he doesn't, I believe, is the selection of a running mate. even under these unorthodox circumstances where he is a former president and he's already made a selection, voters want to see you pick someone, and the press wants to see you pick someone who's instantly perceived, clearly qualified to be president. Everything else, other considerations, fundraising, demographics, etc., all of those are meaningless and really don't matter much. Don't matter at all unless you meet the first criteria. So if Trump picks Glenn Youngkin, Governor Burgum, Marco Rubio, someone who everybody's going to instantly say, yeah, that person could step in and be president. And by the way, more confident about that person stepping in than Kamala Harris, I think he will have succeeded with his pick. If he doesn't, if he picks someone who falls short of that one standard, then I think he's asking for trouble, and he's giving up the advantage that you point out that he would have as people compare the bottom of the ticket in this case.
Is there anyone in the current
because of Biden's age,
in the current crop of folks that is widely touted as being under consideration? Is there anybody that you don't think meets that test?
I'm not sure. Ben Carson, J.D. Vance, Elise Stefanik, I'm not sure they meet the test. I think the three I named pretty clearly meet it. And the second three I named, they might, but I don't think it's automatic. And I think you want.
I got one more thing I want to get. I want to get to one more thing before you go, but you brought up Glenn Youngkin's name. I'm a Virginian here. I think he's a great governor. I've never seen those two together. They have done this little dance about coexisting, but I can't imagine Donald Trump picking Glenn Youngkin. One, because he's too tall. Two, because I just don't think they've got chemistry. I mean, Glenn Youngkin has never been an America First guy. He's done it his own way in Virginia. Yeah. And I just can't see Donald Trump having somebody that doesn't understand the role.
I agree with you that it's not as likely as someone he's already got rapport with. But I think you'd agree with me that if Tony Fabrizio, Trump's pollster and strategist, walked in and said, the data suggests if you pick Youngkin, you win, they'll pick Youngkin.
But do you think Youngkin would have to walk around on his knees or something because Trump wouldn't want someone taller than him?
They do all their interviews seated. I don't know. I mean, look, I know you're not being flip. I know would be a huge consideration for Donald Trump.
Yeah, appearances matter with him.
But if he says, if his thinking is central casting, this guy's going to help me win, this guy's going to help me raise another $1 billion, this guy's going to put Virginia in play. Those are big factors. And again, the press and the public would look at Glenn Youngkin and say, ready to be president. And I'm not sure the others check out as cleanly as Youngkin does.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think it's a good point. I have a hard time thinking they haven't had any rapport. Anyway, the last thing I want to get to, you mentioned. Go ahead.
They'd have to spend some quality time together. Yeah. They'd have to spend some quality time together, no doubt. No doubt.
I also think just as an X factor, I don't know that, and this is just off anecdotal conversations, but I don't know that Mrs. Youngkin's down for that either. That's just okay. So here's the last thing I want to ask you. You brought up Bobby Kennedy. I've been a big believer that Bobby Kennedy wasn't a factor until he showed he could actually get ballot access. He's getting ballot access. He's in they claim to be in at least 3 battleground states: North Carolina, Nevada, Michigan. Who benefits from Bobby Kennedy, and will he be a factor?
Well, look, claiming you've got the number of signatures gathered doesn't equal ballot access. There's legal and technical concerns that need to be vetted through to see. And getting on in a few states doesn't mean he'll get on enough to win the Electoral College. And I'm not sure he'll run. If he's on 15 or 20 states, I'm not sure he'll.
Oh, see, I was going to stop you short and say, I don't think he's not playing to get 270. But you think if he only gets on 15 states, you think he might actually drop out?
Correct. I think he might. And then what's his message? And if he's not on 50, how does he allocate his resources and time? And how does he run? Does he run in a way with a message that hurts Trump more, Biden more? I think there are individual states like Arizona where he would hurt Trump more than Biden. I think there's individual states like California that aren't battlegrounds now that could be put into play if he runs a certain way. On balance, in the battleground states, he hurts Biden more, right, as of now, because I still think Trump has a higher floor but a lower ceiling, and Trump needs the other candidates, whoever they are, to get at least 5% of the vote, I think, to win. And Kennedy makes that more likely. So he hurts Biden more nationally and in most of the battlegrounds, but not in all of them.
I think the point you made about California is brilliant, because the 7 battleground states are predicated on 1v1. Somebody getting 50.1%, 50 plus 1 votes.
Right.
You suddenly take a state where Kennedy could pick up 13, 14% that normally would be Dem leaning or Republican leaning, and it reduces that. I look at even like a state like Utah, potentially, that you suddenly take.
Absolutely.
I mean,
absolutely. Texas. I mean, if and I think Biden is very unpopular with lots of Democrats in California. If Kennedy runs a certain way and devotes attention to California, what if he gets 25% of the vote?
Yeah.
And it comes largely from Biden.
Unbelievable. Mark Halperin, remind people where they can see, because I referenced your two-way. I think that's important to point out. You've got a lot of great stuff that you're doing every day, focus groups, conversations. Tell people where they can go and get your stuff.
You can go to walkingduck.com/Mark, and you can read about how to access my material. walkingduck.com/Mark.
Walking duck, not sitting duck, not running duck, walking duck. That's important to make sure. There's a lot of ducks out there. Mark Halperin, you're my favorite duck. I appreciate you being with us. Thanks for your insight.
Great to see you, Sean. Thank you.
What a great show. Oh, 2 great, amazing guests. Make sure you tune in tomorrow. As I said, we're going to bring you inside the courtroom. Why is everyone going up there? How are they doing it? How do you get on the list to get into the court? What's happening inside the courtroom? Is it as dingy? I'm going to ask all those questions. If you have any tonight, leave it in the chat on our channels tonight, and I'll ask it. We've got a great rest of the week headed your way. As always, continue to subscribe. YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, iTunes, iHeart, all the eyes. Get your podcast now. We'll see you back here tomorrow on The Sean Spicer Show. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.